Hey, Soul Stories fam. We've got a swoon-worthy love story for you today. Let's jump in and tell us, what city are you watching from? The little restaurant sat on a street bathed in golden lights. Soft jazz mingled with the clinking of spoons against glass, creating a warm atmosphere. Though for Grace, it all felt a little bitter. She sat at a table near the window, idly swirling a half-empty glass of red wine. In front of her, a freshly served Caesar salad waited untouched. Grace sighed, then let out a small laugh. Wonderful. Just me, laughing at my own appetizer. She muttered it, but deliberately delivered the line as if hosting a show. A few diners at the next table glanced over, then quickly turned away. Grace shrugged and continued her little monologue. If someone filmed this scene, they'd probably think I'm auditioning for the role of lonely heroine in an indie romance drama. She chuckled again and bit into a piece of lettuce. That witty, cheerful exterior masked the truth, that her heart still felt heavy after years of living with emptiness. Just then, as she tilted the wine glass to her lips, a low and urgent voice sounded right by her ear. "Pretend I'm your boyfriend now." The glass nearly slipped from Grace's hand. She whipped around, glaring, ready to dismiss the bold stranger with a sharp retort, pure Grace style. But instead of yelling, she tilted her head and smirked, half amused, half defiant. "You know, I was planning to raise the price on this act. Renting a boyfriend by the hour isn't cheap." Her tone was mocking, but the way her fingers clutched the chair's edge betrayed the tremor inside. The man slid into the seat across from her. The golden light spilled over his face, illuminating every mature line, every faint crease near his eyes. And Grace froze. She whispered, as if afraid to even hear it herself, "Aaron." It had been 5 years. 5 years since the day he left with a small suitcase and a hollow promise. "I'll come back." 5 years had left her heart fractured, shadowed by the fear of abandonment that still haunted her. And now he was right here, flesh and blood. Not a dream, not an illusion. Grace leaned back, crossed her arms, and gave a sarcastic smile. "Oh, so the fake boyfriend turns out to be my real boyfriend from the past. What a surprise promotion." Her voice was breezy, as if none of this mattered. But inside, memories crashed over her. Afternoons spent studying together, clumsy hallway kisses, scribbled notes left in books, and finally his figure walking away at the train station. Aaron looked at her, hesitation flickering in his eyes before softening. That familiar smile appeared, half timid, half regretful. "Gracie." The sound stunned her. Only he had ever called her that, as if it were their secret code. Grace fought the squeeze in her chest and snapped back quickly, half teasing, "Don't use the password. It's been 5 years. Did you really think one old nickname would make me forget everything?" Aaron stayed silent, his gaze never leaving her. In that moment, Grace felt split in two. The outward Grace, witty and strong, and the inner Grace, small and afraid. "Don't trust him. Don't give him the chance to leave you again," a voice inside warned. But another softer voice whispered, "He's here. He remembers. And your heart never truly let go." Grace bit her lip lightly, then laughed, trying to steer the moment back to lightness. "All right, as temporary boyfriend, how long do you plan to keep up the act? So I'll know what to put on the bill." Aaron gave a faint laugh, but in his deep eyes a storm of emotions raged. A waiter placed another glass of wine on the table, the restaurant's hum resuming around them. But between Grace and Aaron, it was as if the world had stopped. She picked up her fork, stabbing at her salad, feigning indifference. Yet the slight tremble in her hand betrayed her. Inside, an old fear stirred. Would he stay this time? Or was he only a fleeting shadow across her dinner table? Grace lifted her gaze, managing a half-playful, half-sincere smile. "Well then, let's just say tonight I have company. As for tomorrow, let's see what fate decides." Aaron's eyes remained on her, silent. And so, Grace's quiet evening, once meant to be nothing more than salad and self-mocking laughter, had turned into the opening of a story she wasn't sure she was brave enough to continue. The restaurant's atmosphere stayed the same. The clinking of glasses, the scrape of knives and forks against plates, and the faint aroma of steak in the air. But for Grace, all her senses felt unsettled. Right across from her sat Aaron, the man who once walked out of her life without looking back. Grace drew in a deep breath, rearranged her expression, and curved her lips into a smile. You've aged. Are these wrinkles included free with the international contracts? Aaron chuckled, surprised by that familiar quick wit. His smile carried a hint of nostalgia, as if it pulled him back to the days when they were college students, and Grace constantly teased him with absurd remarks. You haven't changed a bit. Always know how to turn everything into a joke. Grace tilted her chin, raised her wine glass, her voice brimming with feigned confidence. Of course, people call that survival skills. Otherwise, how do you think I managed to get through these past years? On the outside, Grace was relaxed and witty, but inside she was in turmoil. Looking at Aaron made her heart sting. If I trust him again, would I just be throwing myself off a cliff one more time? Memories came rushing back. Long nights by her mother's hospital bed, alone, with no one to share the weight. Back then, not a single message, not even a call from him. Only silence, and that hollow promise still echoing in her mind. Her fingers tightened around the glass, swallowing down the feeling with a dazzling smile. Aaron studied her, then spoke softly, his tone slow and sincere. Life out there wasn't anything like I thought it would be. When I first left, I believed it would mean opportunity, success. But in the end, it was just 80-hour work weeks, lonely dinners in hotel rooms. He sighed, his hand unconsciously twisting the paper napkin. There were times I asked myself, what was I really trading everything for? Grace let out a laugh as though his words were nothing more than a dull anecdote. For wrinkles and overpriced airport coffee, right? Sounds worth it to me. Aaron lifted his gaze, chuckled faintly, but his eyes remained serious. You always do this, hiding everything behind jokes. Grace flinched but instantly deflected with an eye roll. Better than crying in front of you. I don't want to waste my makeup just to fix smudged mascara. They talked a little more. Aaron shared about the cities he had lived in, the big projects, and the lavish parties that never brought him joy. Grace answered with sharp quips, masking the bitterness that gnawed at her. While you were roaming the world, I was struggling with hospital bills. When dinner ended, Aaron hesitated before asking, Can I take you home? Grace smiled, replying instantly, as though without a second thought. No need, I'll grab a taxi. It's safer. You know, I'm not used to hiring boyfriends/drivers. It sounded playful, but in truth, it was a wall. She refused to let him take even one step further into her world. When Grace returned to her small apartment, the street lamp cast a golden glow against the wall. She unlocked the door and stepped into her familiar space. Bookshelves stuffed full, a tiny jasmine plant on the balcony, a faded sofa. She set her bag down and flicked on the kitchen light. The room was so quiet that even the sound of her shoes against the floor echoed. Leaning back against the refrigerator, she burst into laughter. A loud, deliberate laugh, almost shrill. God, Grace, how ridiculous. He comes back, older, whining about his boring life, and you're shaking like a teenager in love. How pathetic. She laughed and laughed until her throat tightened. The laughter faded into shallow breaths, then into silence. Grace covered her eyes with her hand, whispering, Don't cry. He's not worth it. But the corners of her eyes burned hot. She bit her lip, swallowing the tears, then patted her own shoulder as if consoling herself. Tomorrow, when you wake up, it'll all just be a play, and you'll still be Grace, the cheerful, witty Grace. Outside on the balcony, the wind stirred, making the jasmine plant tremble gently. The apartment returned to stillness, but inside Grace, the old cracks in her heart had begun to split open once more. The cafe sat neatly on the street corner, small and charming with wide glass windows, pale wooden tables, and the scent of Arabica drifting through the air. Grace sat by the window, where the morning sun slanted through the blinds, scattering gentle golden streaks across the table. She wondered how many times she had sat here alone, with a book, a latte, and half-finished thoughts. But today was different. Aaron was here. The man who had once vanished was now standing at the counter, ordering a cappuccino. Grace chuckled to herself. Still cappuccino. After all these years, your taste hasn't updated. You're like a stubborn Windows XP. When Aaron returned with his cup, he set it down and smiled faintly. I heard that. I still enjoy teasing people, just as I did before. Grace raised her brows, resting her chin on her hand. That's called memory maintenance skills. You know, they say making the same jokes is better than Alzheimer's. Aaron laughed, but soon fell quiet when his fingers began twisting the napkin on the table. The same old habit. Grace didn't let it pass. Oh my God, you're still doing that thing, twisting napkins when you're nervous. I told you before, at this rate you could start a whole rope-making company out of napkins. Aaron flushed slightly, letting go of the napkin, but his smile softened. You still remember? Grace shrugged, pretending it meant nothing. I remember so I can tease you, not because I hold on to memories. Don't get too confident. The words sounded light, but in Grace's heart, those little details had never faded. Habits, quirks, the tiniest things. She had once cherished them so much that forgetting was impossible. Aaron looked at her for a moment, then drew in a quiet breath. And your mother? How is she these days? That simple question froze Grace's smile. For a fleeting moment, her eyes drifted away, as if pulled into an invisible void. Then, forcing a laugh, she lifted her latte. My mom. Well, she's probably up in heaven right now, complaining to the angels. My daughter lives off instant noodles. It sounded like a joke, but her voice trembled slightly. Aaron didn't speak, only watched in silence, seeing the deep sadness hidden behind her eyes. Grace went on, keeping her tone bright. She passed 3 years ago. I stayed with her until the very end. It was hard, sure, but at least I got to tell her all about the times I burned dinner. She laughed, said maybe I inherited the cooking talent of our neighbor, not hers. Grace laughed loudly, as though it were a funny story, but inside her chest tightened. The long nights by her mother's hospital bed, the sound of machines, the weak grip of her mother's hand. She had hidden all of it, transformed into a featherlight joke. Aaron was quiet for a moment, then said softly, Your smile, it's different now. Grace feigned surprise, raising her brows. Different as in prettier, right? This is called premium upgraded smile. Comes with a fee, you know. Aaron shook his head, his gaze steady. Number, it feels more like armor. You smile to cover something up. For an instant, Grace felt exposed. She quickly bit her lip, then laughed out loud, trying to chase the heaviness away. You've got the wrong script. I'm just someone who likes to crack jokes. Don't turn me into some Shakespeare tragedy. I'd make a terrible Juliet. But inside, his words had struck home. Yes, I smile to cover. I smile because if I don't, I'll cry. I smile so no one sees how fragile I am. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, people bustled past, motorbikes revved, and sunlight gleamed off steaming cups of coffee. Grace leaned her chin on her hand, pretending to be casual. So, what about you? How many napkins have you twisted in all those faraway cities? Aaron chuckled and answered with a long list of places he had been, though a trace of weariness lingered in his voice. Grace listened, teasing and smiling, but deep inside, one question kept echoing. This time, will he really stay? By the time the clock edged toward noon, they both stood up. Aaron hesitated, then asked, Can I see you again? Grace replied instantly, joking as always. I'll have to check my schedule. I'm busy arguing with my oven every night. Aaron laughed, though his eyes still held hope. Grace walked out of the cafe, quick steps carrying her away. The breeze lifted her hair, and she chuckled, teasing herself. Here we go again, Grace. Careful now. But in her heart, she knew the truth. The cracks had never healed, and this meeting had only made them clearer than ever. Aaron had planned to finish the contract in 3 days, but he decided to stay longer. The reason was simple. Grace. After all these years, just seeing her smile in front of him again, hearing her sharp humor, it was something he couldn't walk away from. I'm extending the trip for another week, Aaron told his associate firmly over the phone. When he set the phone down, he took a deep breath. A small decision, but one that carried weight. This was a chance he didn't want to lose again. On Wednesday afternoon, Grace texted, "My book club is meeting tonight. If you're available, feel free to drop by. But fair warning, it's not some CEO roundtable. Just a bunch of people gossiping about novels." Aaron smiled and went. The familiar cafe was more crowded than usual. In one corner, a group of about 8 sat gathered around a table stacked with novels, steaming cups of tea and plates of cookies. Grace was the center of it all. Animated, gesturing as she talked, she joked about the heroine in the fantasy novel they had just read. I swear, give her a cast iron skillet, and she could fight monsters while cooking dinner for the whole gang. The group burst into laughter. One friend chimed in, "Grace, if you played that character, the script would definitely need a scene where the kitchen goes up in flames." Grace clutched her chest dramatically. "Oh, you're all so cruel. I only burned the kitchen 3 times, and suddenly I'm labeled a permanent fire hazard." Laughter filled the room. The atmosphere was light and joyful, and Aaron realized Grace truly was the soul of these gatherings. Aaron sat quietly observing. Between the bursts of laughter and her playful manner, he caught a fleeting moment. Grace gazing out the window, her eyes distant. It was only a second, but enough for him to see it wasn't joy. Behind all that laughter, "You're still lonely, aren't you?" When their eyes met by chance, Grace immediately snapped her smile back into place, teasing, "Aaron, what do you think? If this character were to walk into a multinational company, would she survive?" Aaron blinked, then chuckled. "Probably. She'd twist enough napkins to save the world with one giant rope." The group roared with laughter. Grace laughed the loudest, but Aaron knew. Her smile wasn't as carefree as it once had been. When the book club wrapped up, everyone said their goodbyes. Grace and Aaron walked out together. The autumn night was mild, the breeze carrying the scent of milk flowers through the air. They strolled side by side down a small street. Aaron spoke first. "You're different from what I imagined." Grace arched a brow, feigning seriousness. "Different how? Worse? So I'll know whether to send you an invoice." "No," Aaron shook his head. "Stronger, but also—" He hesitated, afraid the words might hurt her. Grace tilted her head, blinking playfully. "But also what?" "Also lonelier," he said softly. Grace was silent for a moment. Then she laughed, waving a hand as if to brush the words away. "You're wrong. I've got plenty of company. I can talk to myself all night long. Don't need anyone else. I'm even funnier than television." Her reply was witty, but in her eyes a brief sadness flickered. Aaron saw it clearly. As they neared a corner, Grace stopped, looked at him, half joking, half serious. "Go wherever you want, but don't make promises. I'm allergic to them now." She smiled, trying to keep it light, but her voice was a little hoarse. Without waiting for his response, Grace turned and walked away. Aaron stood there watching her small figure fade into the distance. A resolve welled up inside him. "This time, I'll prove it with actions. No more empty promises." It was a late weekend afternoon when Grace attended the opening of a small book cafe, a place she often visited. By chance, Aaron was also there, accompanied by a few old friends that Grace had never met. They gathered at the coffee counter, chatting and laughing loudly. Grace stood beside Aaron, doing her best to remain composed. But then a tall man, apparently one of Aaron's former colleagues, clapped him on the shoulder and let out a careless remark. "Remember back then, Aaron? If you'd gone back just for a girl, you'd never have gotten to where you are today. Career always comes first, and you made the right call." The words were spoken casually, as if it were a compliment. But to Grace, they cut like a blade straight into her heart. For a moment, everything around her fell silent. The laughter, the music, even the cafe's warm golden lights suddenly felt blinding. Her heart pounded fast, heavy. Grace swallowed hard, then burst into loud laughter that drew everyone's attention. "Ah, so that's how it is. Career's number 1, and I'm number 0, right? Makes perfect sense. Simple math." The air froze briefly. A few startled glances flickered her way, while Aaron stared at her, stunned. Grace swirled her coffee cup, her voice sharp with biting wit. "Guess I really was stupid. Thought I mattered when in reality I was just the zero in your grand equation. It's a good thing I never multiplied myself with you, or my whole life would have ended up zero. The group chuckled awkwardly, then quickly tried to change the subject. But Aaron had already set his cup down, his eyes locked on Grace. When the others drifted away and only the two of them remained, Grace could no longer hold up the mask of laughter. She turned aside, her voice breaking. So that's all it was, isn't it, Aaron? Back then you stood at a crossroads, and I lost. I wasn't worth as much as a job title. Aaron shook his head quickly. No, that's not how it was. Grace cut him off, her tone sharp, though her lips forced into a bitter smile. Stop, Aaron. Don't try to paint it pretty. Your friend already said it all. Career came first. I was just another name on the list of things you could leave behind. Her voice trembled, tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. No, Grace, don't you dare cry in front of him. Aaron reached out as if to take her hand, but Grace pulled back. You don't understand, he said urgently. Back then, I thought, just a few years and I'd come back. Then I could give you everything. Everything? Grace let out a harsh laugh, the sound so bitter it startled even her. You don't get it, Aaron. I never needed everything from you. I just needed you, but you chose to leave. And now you think you can just come back as if nothing happened? The air grew taut, stretched like a drawn string. Curious eyes turned their way, but Grace didn't care. She felt as if every old wound inside her had burst open all at once. Aaron lowered his voice. I'm sorry, Grace. I was wrong. I've never stopped thinking about you. Grace smirked. Sounds familiar. I'm sorry, but... The classic line from every heartbreak movie. She grabbed her bag, turning to leave, but paused for a moment. Inside, pain swelled until she thought she'd collapse. Yet she forced out words that came half as a joke, half as a plea. Apologies don't pay the bill for emotions, Aaron. I need to keep my distance. For my own safety. Do you understand? And with that, she strode quickly outside. The wind hit her hard, icy cold. Grace kept her head down, forcing a crooked smile at herself. Good job, Grace. Laugh. Just keep laughing, because if you stop, you'll cry. Her eyes blurred with unshed tears as her figure disappeared at the end of the street. Back in the cafe, Aaron stood frozen, watching her go, realizing that the distance between them had only stretched wider once again. After the argument at the book cafe, Grace decided to keep her distance. She drew herself a dry routine. Work, home, read, sleep. No Aaron, no late-night texts, no coffee dates. That was the theory. Reality, however, had other plans. On Monday morning, the entire newsroom was in chaos because a poetry manuscript scheduled for release got delayed at the printer. The editor-in-chief stood before the planning board, muttering like he was summoning spirits. Superpowers, show yourself. Grace hugged the stack of pages, trying to keep her voice calm. I'll try contacting a few other places. When she returned to her desk, a yellow sticky note was plastered on her screen. There's an open slot at 11 a.m. Thursday. Call Lindsay at Hudson Printworks. Say you're a friend of A. G.A. Grace frowned. G.A.? Who signed like a spy? She dialed the number. On the other end, a warm woman's voice answered, Hudson Printworks, this is Lindsay. You're Grace, right? Aaron told me. We've just canceled a job. Your slot is still safe at 11 a.m. Thursday. Grace froze. She set the phone down, telling herself, stay calm, just a phone call. Right help, right time. She snorted softly. Well, I guess an open slot can walk itself over and say hello now. That afternoon, Megan from marketing came running up. Hot news, our young author interview got picked up by Shelf and Son. Who sent that brilliant pitch? I didn't. What? Then who did? Back at her desk, another note awaited her. That pitch was your idea last week. I only sent it to the right place. P.S. Not taking credit, just saving you time. A. Grace bit her lip. Taking the back route to help me, huh? Fine, I'll take it, but don't expect me to admit it. The next day, the office printer jammed, screeching like an alarm. Mr. Howard, the kind old building guard, was fumbling with it when a man in rolled-up sleeves stepped in, popped the latch, pulled the toner, freed the jam, and set it back neatly. The printer purred to life. From the doorway, Grace crossed her arms. "Long time no see, Mr. Fix-It." Aaron turned, smiling faintly. "Just passing by." The noise was so loud I thought it might kill the muse. "Sure, passing by, and just happened to know exactly where the screwdriver was kept. Nothing suspicious there. I know you want distance, I won't intrude. Just small things so you won't be so tired." Grace rolled her eyes, but her heart softened a little. After a tense day, it mattered that someone was quietly slipping a pillow behind her back. And the small things kept appearing. The water cooler refilled before she arrived. The jasmine pot on her windowsill suddenly had fresh soil and stronger leaves. In her drawer, a packet of mints with a note, "Use before presentations, so the coffee breath won't betray you." Grace laughed, muttering, "Like having an invisible assistant with a sense of humor." That night, the whole office stayed late. The sky had been heavy since the afternoon, and then the rain broke loose, pouring over the city like a giant showerhead. Grace stepped out of the lobby, coat spotted with drops, and ducked under the awning of a closed bookstore. A black umbrella suddenly unfolded above her. "You'll catch a cold," Aaron's voice said. "Oh, wow, my invisible assistant upgraded to mobile umbrella service?" Grace tilted her face to the rain. "It looks like the city's testing public showers. Too bad they forgot the body wash." Aaron chuckled, tilting the umbrella toward her, letting his own shoulder soak. "If you keep talking, you'll swallow the rain." "That's fine, I'll absorb minerals. I'm self-repairing, like a cactus." A lightning bolt split the sky. Grace startled, instinctively leaning back against the wall. Aaron angled the umbrella further, his other hand brushing lightly against her arm. A fleeting touch, but enough to string her taut as a bow. She kept joking, though her voice was lower. "So how do you plan to get home? Weather Uber? If the rain doesn't stop, I'll wait." "Wait? Like when you said a few years and then disappeared?" The jab slipped out faster than thought. Grace bit her lip. Again, Grace. Rain hammered on the umbrella, the awning, the bricks. "I know," Aaron said quietly. "That's why I'll talk less and prove more." "Like the past few days?" Grace's gaze locked on his, both challenging and uncertain. "Helping me with the printer, the pitch, the water cooler, the plants. And then one fine morning, you're gone again with your suitcase?" You're sure?" "I won't promise, because you're allergic to promises. But I can be here, today, and tomorrow, and the next, until you stop fearing I'll disappear." Grace let out a laugh, part sigh. "So you're selling an installment plan for trust?" "Yeah, no interest. The seller is very persistent." The wind sprayed mist into the awning. Wet strands clung to her temple. The chill wasn't just from rain. It came from the old fear simmering inside. "And if you vanish again?" Her voice was so faint it nearly dissolved into the rain. "I don't think I can get back up another time." Aaron's hand closed around hers, slow and steady, like setting a book back on its shelf. "I don't want you to have to get back up. If you're weak, lean on me. If you're strong, I'll walk beside you. I'm not asking for forgiveness right now, just a place to stand, beside you." Grace lowered her head. Half of her wanted to throw her arms around him and say yes. The other half wanted to retreat and lock the door. She reached for her oldest weapon, humor. "Standing beside me has requirements. 1. Know how to change water coolers. 2. Know how to fix printers. 3. Know how to cook noodles without burning down the kitchen. Requirement 3. Negotiable. Number mandatory. I've burned enough kitchens already. I need someone to turn the knob off at the right time." They looked at each other. Rain fell thick like a curtain. Somewhere a car horn echoed. Aaron leaned the umbrella against the wall, his hands empty, as if to say he carried no arguments, only presence. "Grace," he murmured. She looked up. In that moment, every joke deserted her. Her eyes glistened. not clear if from rain or something else. If you don't want this, I'll step back. Don't promise me anything, she whispered, voice husky. Just be here. He stepped once closer. She didn't move away. Another step. With only breath between them, Aaron stopped, letting them both hear their hearts through the rain. His hand cupped her cheek, warmer than she expected. Grace didn't speak, just leaned into his palm, a nod almost invisible. The kiss came not as a plan, but as instinct, like someone had flicked on a switch in a dark room and light flooded in. Her defenses fell away like droplets off her hair. The fear was still there. It slipped between heartbeats, made her chest ache. But at the same time, another force just as strong flung the door open. How long have I been waiting for this? Aaron kissed her slowly, never demanding, leaving room for her to pull back or step forward. Grace chose forward. She looped her arms around his neck, inhaling the scent of rain and warm cotton, hearing the downpour drum the awning like war drums. The kiss was tender, then suddenly fierce, like sparks catching fuel. She giggled into it, breathless. Fire alarm. Careful. Yeah, he whispered, forehead against hers, breath ragged. This time I'm here to put the fire out. They stayed like that longer than needed. When they parted, Grace leaned her forehead against his shoulder, listening to the rain crash down like a waterfall. Part of her scolded herself for being weak. Another part felt impossibly light. All right, she stepped half a pace back, trying to recover her sass. Now that you've been present, walk me home. Not because I'm weak, just because my shoes are turning into mini swimming pools. Roger that, boss. And hey, she narrowed her eyes, no saying, I promise on the way. I censor that hard. Copy, I'll just walk beside you. They stepped out into the rain, sharing one umbrella. Water splashed against Grace's wrist until Aaron gently tugged her hand closer, a gesture as natural as breathing. She let it stay. The city poured rain on rooftops, sidewalks, and the two figures trudging like small exclamation marks in a very long sentence. At her door, Grace turned. Thanks for the little things. Anytime. Don't overdo it. I get dependent easily. Then I'll do just enough. One little thing a day. You know what? Her voice softened. I'm still scared. I know. Be scared. I'll be here with it. She pressed her lips together and nodded. See you tomorrow. Then quickly added, correcting herself. If you're still around tomorrow. I'll be around. The door closed. Grace leaned against the wood, fingers brushing her lips. The kiss still burned like a brand. She laughed softly, this time not to cover up, but because something warm had sparked in her chest amid the pounding storm outside. In the hall, Aaron lingered. Rain soaked his shoulder again, cold. But inside he felt warm, as if he had finally found a place to stand, the place he'd been circling for years. That night the rain kept falling. Grace's fear hadn't vanished, but within the storm something else had slipped in, a presence. And sometimes that's all it takes for a story to change direction. Still following the story? If this story found you outside of Soul Stories, we invite you home, to where every touching tale begins with truth, hope, and heart. The morning after the rain, the city looked freshly washed. The sidewalks still glistened damp, leaves jeweled with drops of water. Grace, unusually early for work, had barely stepped into the newsroom when a message lit up her screen. Aaron, the weather's nice today. Can I have the honor of bringing you coffee? Not a promise. I'm already downstairs at the counter. She looked down at her shoes, a smile tugging at her lips. Small, secret, hers alone. Then she reminded herself, stay calm, presence, not promises, and I still have a whole list of standards he has to meet. Before she could reply, Aaron's phone buzzed downstairs. He glanced at the caller ID, an international number. Global operations. His heartbeat quickened. He knew exactly what this call was, the offer that had been hinted at for weeks. He answered. On the other end, a vice president's voice. We've just finalized the Asia-Pacific project. We want you in Singapore long-term, minimum 3 years. The package is excellent. Equity, bonuses, housing, and your own team. Flight leaves next week, if you say yes today. Aaron stared at the cafe's steel ceiling and the round bulbs reflected across its surface. For a second, he saw again the identical hotel rooms in shifting time zones, the long nights staring at white ceilings, the dangling keychains on his backpack, proof that he was always just passing through. "Give me a few hours," he replied. "I'll call back." He hung up, shut his eyes briefly. Then he texted Grace. "On my way up." Grace set a stack of manuscripts on her desk just as Aaron walked in with two to-go cups. He wore a navy shirt, its sleeves neatly rolled, his hair still damp from the morning mist. She was ready to tease him with another Mr. Fix-It joke when he spoke gravely. "I need to tell you something, and I want to say it straight. No hiding, no detours." Grace arched a brow, defense mechanism primed with humor. "Sounds serious. Don't tell me you finally learned how to boil noodles without burning them." I'd cry with joy. "They want to send me overseas, long-term, 3 years." The air dropped a degree. Grace blinked once, twice. Then she let out a laugh, soft, too soft. "Congratulations. Time to collect another keychain." Her words hung between them. To passers-by, she was just a woman calmly sipping her latte, congratulating an ex-boyfriend, or a not-quite-boyfriend. No one could see the sweat slicking her palms, or the sudden hollow in her chest as if someone had yanked out a rib. 3 years, she thought. Once upon a time, he said, a few years. I survived those few years with tears and hospital bills. Could I survive another 3? Aaron held her gaze. I'm planning to say no. Oh? Grace's smile curved sharply. Since when does no belong in the vocabulary of a man obsessed with business cards and airport lounges? Since I chose to stay. She smiled, but her eyes did not. Stay where? In my inbox? In the diary titled, Once Upon a Time? Aaron? You know I'm allergic to promises. I'm not promising, I'm doing. He placed the coffee on her desk, pulled out his phone, and dragged a chair beside her as if afraid she might bolt. On the screen was a freshly drafted email, subject line, Decline, APAC assignment. Short, crisp, professional. His finger hovered over send. Before I hit this, I want to be clear. This isn't a romantic impulse. It's because I'm done living out of a suitcase. I don't want more keychains. I want one real key to one real place, here. Grace's heart thudded. She forced a smirk. That line could win best drama in a TV script. I'm not scripting. His eyes stayed on her. I'm asking, do you want me to stay? 1 second, 2, 3. Don't say yes, a voice in her head warned. Too dangerous. But another quieter voice whispered, what if this time is different? I don't want to control your decision, Grace said slowly. I don't want tomorrow to hear you say, because of you, I missed my chance. I refuse to be someone's excuse for regret. Then let me make it clear. I want to stay because I want to change the way I live. And you, if you give me a place to stand, I'll be grateful. If you don't, I'll still stay. She laughed, a short, brittle sound like glass touching glass. Sounds like an unconditional stay contract. Where's the penalty clause? The penalty is, I do one small thing for you every day. No skipping allowed. Grace lowered her gaze to the desk edge. The panic that had swelled earlier now settled into ripples on a lake. But ripples still. She murmured, half joking, half real. Send the email first. Then we'll see what page we're on in this novel of your life. Aaron pressed send. The whoosh of the email echoed loudly in her ears. He flipped the phone screen toward her. The message was marked as sent. Then he set the phone face down, hands empty, as in the rain last night, carrying no arguments, just presence. Done, he exhaled. Now the harder part, facing my boss. Oh, can I watch from the audience? I'll bring caramel popcorn. Might need it, he smiled, but I'll go alone. I want to stand in the storm myself, not drag you in. His phone buzzed again, boss's name flashing. Aaron stepped into the hall. Through the glass, Grace watched him pace, look up at the ceiling, and clench his fist. She couldn't hear a word, only saw him standing straight, unflinching. When he returned, he sat down. They're giving me one last chance. Bigger package. Time until tonight. If I change my mind, a plane ticket will be in my inbox before dawn. Grace wanted to quip about a deluxe upgrade, but her throat stuck. She only nodded. Your choice, Aaron typed quickly. Thank you. My answer remains no. Sent. Another whoosh. A stamp closing a chapter. He exhaled. Longer this time. I just locked one door, Aaron said softly. Not because I hated what was behind it, but because it's time to open another. Grace leaned forward, chin in hand, pretending nonchalance while her heart raced. That door better come with a kitchen. I need someone to watch the stove knobs. It does, and a water cooler is always full. And someone to time you every time you forget to turn the faucet off. Lies, I only forgot a dozen times. They laughed together. This time the laughter was light, for real, not sugar-wrapped blades. After work, Grace and Aaron sat on the newsroom steps, each holding a soda, watching people stream past. The sky had cleared, with clouds drifting toward the river, and golden light brushing the edges of the buildings. Tomorrow I start wrapping up the project, Aaron said, and I'll talk to HR about transferring here for now. After that, I have plans, something I've wanted to try but never dared. What plans? Grace narrowed her eyes. To go smaller, deeper, here. Bigger isn't always better. Maybe a small consulting group, maybe partnerships with local firms. I want to end each day in a place where someone's waiting to hear my stories. Grace stared straight ahead, her voice airy. And that someone is, if you'll let me, you. If not, then your jasmine plant. It looks like a good listener. Grace laughed, nudging his shoulder. Flattery noted, but I'm still scared. I know. He didn't flinch. Be scared. Fear means you once loved for real, and I'll wait until that fear moves aside. A group of students passed by, laughing with iced drinks in hand. Grace watched them, then turned back with steady, bright eyes. For now, let's sign a Phase 1 presence agreement. One small thing a day. No promises, just schedule. Tomorrow morning, 8:30, the water cooler will be full. Noon, remind me to eat. Afternoon, no flood of texts. Evening, don't show up at my door with 11 roses. Why 11? Because 12 is too corny. Got it? Aaron's face turned mock serious as if taking an assignment. Can I add, take you out for tacos Friday night? We'll see. Grace dragged out the words, pretending to weigh them. If you don't say the word promise, maybe I'll allow it. Maybe. Copy, no promise. He pulled something from his pocket, a plain metal keychain ring, empty. The last one I bought, he said, blank. I want to hang a real key on it when you're ready. Not tomorrow, not next month. Just whenever you feel safe enough to trust the jingle every time you walk out your door. Grace looked at the little ring in his hand. Her heart melted like honey under the sun. She took it, tapped it lightly in her palm, letting out the faintest chime. Okay, she said, voice stripped of banter. For now, leave it empty. I need time to believe you won't hang a plane ticket on it instead. I won't. I know. She paused, then corrected herself softly. I'm learning to know. They sat a long while in silence, listening as the city shifted from day to night. When they rose, Aaron said, Tonight I won't walk you home. I have to face my boss again and finalize everything. But tomorrow at 8:30, the water cooler will be full. Caught you. Sounds like a promise, Grace teased. Number, that's a schedule. He winked. Grace laughed out loud. Go then, Mr. Fix-It. I'll check tomorrow. He stepped back, saluted playfully, then turned away. Grace stood on the steps watching him go. The morning panic had faded, leaving only the rustle of wind through leaves. She closed her fingers around the empty keychain and slipped it into her pocket. For the first time, she felt something small but solid, like a trickle of water finding its way through stone. At the end of the street, Aaron glanced back. He said no words, made no promises, just placed his hand over his heart and nodded once, as if speaking in the new language between them. No. This time, I'm staying. In the days that followed, Grace's life quietly shifted. No more long, dragging evenings alone in her little apartment with the jasmine pot on the balcony. No more rushed lunches of sandwiches eaten at her desk. Instead, there was Aaron. They had morning coffee together at their familiar cafe, talked about the books Grace was editing, about the cities Aaron had passed through. They wandered through places they used to visit years ago. The small riverside bookstore, the bakery that once sold those ridiculously cheap but surprisingly delicious muffins. Sometimes they didn't need to say much at all, just sit side by side, letting the city's noise become background music to their shared silence. In those moments, Grace felt happiness swelling up, drowning her old fears deep at the bottom of her heart. Maybe this time, I can believe, she thought. Maybe he really is staying. That afternoon, Grace decided to surprise Aaron at his office with a printed copy of a book he had promised to read. She pushed the door open and saw him standing in a meeting room, white shirt, navy tie slightly askew. Beside him stood a young woman with her brown hair tied neatly back, confident and composed, clearly a close colleague. As they spoke, the woman reached out and casually straightened Aaron's tie. Grace froze for just a second. Her smile held, but something heavy dropped inside her chest. "Oh, so now you finally have someone who knows how to manage your ties," she said, her voice playful, half joking, half cutting. Aaron turned, his face lighting up in surprise. "Grace, this is Maya, my colleague. She manages the European support team. Maya, this is Grace." Maya smiled, extending her hand. "It's so nice to meet you. Aaron's told me a lot about you." Grace shook her hand, still smiling. "Then you must be the savior whenever he starts twisting napkins in stress." "I've retired from that job." The room broke into laughter, easy and light. But inside Grace, a quiet wave began to rise. As they left, Aaron cheerfully spoke of plans for tomorrow night, inviting Grace to try a new Italian restaurant. She nodded, still quipping like always. "As long as you don't get to pick the wine. The last time you ordered the most expensive bottle was just because it had a cat on the label." Aaron laughed. "I thought you liked cats." "I like cats, not drinking them." They both laughed, but when Aaron wasn't looking, Grace's eyes darkened. In her mind, the image replayed again and again. Maya standing close, adjusting his tie. Natural. Familiar. Too familiar. She remembered the long years of loneliness, the feeling of being left behind. And one thought, small but relentless, crept in. What if it's the same this time? What if he chooses another world I don't belong to? That night in her small apartment, Grace sat by the window, staring at the jasmine plant. Its faint fragrance wasn't enough to ease her chest. She laughed at herself bitterly. Well done, Grace. From collecting keychains to letting someone else fix his tie. She typed a short message to Aaron. "I'm busy tomorrow. Let's save the Italian place for another time." The reply came quickly. "That's fine. Don't forget dinner, okay?" Grace stared at the dark screen inside. She told herself she was still in control. Better to step back now, before it's too late. If I don't matter enough, at least I can leave on my own terms. That night, the city outside glowed with streetlights and endless streams of cars, but inside Grace, only darkness stretched. She pulled the blanket over her head, whispering a cruel joke to herself. "Congratulations, Grace. Once again, you've managed to become the outsider." She didn't cry. Instead, as always, she laughed softly. But this time, the laugh trembled, like a crack running deeper through the mask she had worn for far too long. That weekend, Grace sat in her familiar cafe, laptop open in front of her, though her eyes kept drifting out the window. Across the street, children chased each other in a game of tag, their laughter pricking like tiny needles at the shell she'd built around herself. The latte on her table had long gone cold. A gentle voice cut in. "Grace?" She looked up. Maya stood there, bright-faced, cappuccino in hand. Grace stiffened slightly, then gave a polite nod. "Ah, Maya. Hello?" Maya slid into the chair opposite, unfazed by the edge in Grace's voice. Setting down her cup, her eyes were warm but serious. "I think we need to talk." Grace crossed her arms, leaning back with a smile poised like armor. "If it's about Aaron's work, I'm not his assistant." "No," Maya shook her head. "It's about him. And you." Grace arched a brow, letting sarcasm drip to mask her unease. Oh, this is starting to sound like a soap opera. Are you about to tell me I should let him go? Maya smiled but didn't counter directly. Instead, she spoke softly. Actually, the opposite. I want you to know Aaron has never forgotten you. The words made Grace's heart skip, but she forced a laugh, half bitter. People say that kind of thing all the time. Makes it sound dramatic. Maya leaned forward, voice steady, sincere. I've worked with Aaron for nearly 2 years. He's not the type to talk much about his personal life, but sometimes on business trips, he'd pull out a small, worn heart-shaped keychain and turn it in his hand. He told me it was a gift from the one person he regrets losing. Grace froze. She knew exactly what that was. The cheap souvenir keychain she'd given him on their first anniversary. Worthless in money, but priceless to her heart back then. You're sure it was that one? Grace's voice was hoarse. Certain, Maya nodded. He carried it everywhere. Paris, Berlin, Singapore, Tokyo. I teased him that he collected keychains from around the world but still kept the one old rusted piece. He just smiled and said, "That one can't be replaced." Grace's chest tightened. Heat pricked at her eyes, but she forced a crooked smile. Romantic, sure. Or maybe it's just his way of easing his own guilt? Maya didn't flinch. She sat up straight, gaze unwavering. I don't meddle in other people's relationships, but I know when someone is truly haunted. Aaron doesn't always speak, but there were nights, working late, when he'd sigh, look out the window and murmur, "If only she still thinks of me." Grace fell silent. Outside, horns blared and music spilled from a nearby shop. She tapped her fingers against her cup, then gave a faint, shaky smile. Thank you for telling me. Maya nodded, stood, then turned back before leaving. He isn't perfect, but one thing I know, of everyone he's ever met, you're the only one he's never let go of in his heart. When Maya left, Grace sat motionless. Then a laugh escaped her lips, trembling like a string brushed by the wind. Well, Grace, this is harder than not believing. She closed her eyes. Memories surged back. The kiss in the rain, the little tasks Aaron quietly did, his steady gaze as he hit send on the email declining the overseas assignment. All tangled now with the image of that heart-shaped keychain. He really carried it all these years. Part of her felt soothed, as if a balm had been laid over an old wound. She wasn't the only one holding on to memories, but another part churned with turmoil. If I believe, will the old tragedy repeat? If I wager my heart again and he vanishes, what then? She whispered to herself, half in jest, half in plea. Grace, you really are an expert at torturing yourself with limited trust. That night back in her apartment, Grace set her bag on the sofa and stood at the window, staring at the jasmine on the balcony. The little plant was still thriving, its new leaves trembling in the breeze. She remembered someone had quietly replaced its soil not long ago. She touched it, fresh, damp. A faint smile flickered. Not quite joy, not quite sorrow, just a tentative warmth. He really has stayed, she thought. The only question now was, do I dare trust? Do I dare open my heart? Or not? Grace sank into the couch, hugging a pillow, shaking her head. Inside, relief and fear interlaced like two streams flowing in opposite directions. Yet for the first time in years, she felt she was standing at a true crossroads, not just haunted by memory, but facing the present knocking at her door. The little cafe on the corner had stood for years, but to Grace it still carried the familiar scent of youth. Dark-stained wood, black and white photographs fading on the wall, the warm glow of a yellow lamp above the round table where they once studied together, scribbling on napkins and laughing like kids. Tonight, when Grace walked in, the place was nearly empty, lit only by a few small candles. Aaron was already there, wearing a simple shirt. On the table sat 2 cappuccinos and a plate of muffins, the same kind they used to buy cheaply just to save money. Grace raised a brow, half teasing, half serious. If this is a PR stunt, you should have hired a cheaper agency. The setup looks a little low budget. Aaron chuckled softly. Low budget, but real. And it's everything I remember about us. Grace sat down, tapping her fingers lightly on the wood. voice playful to hide her nerves. So what are you pitching this time? Boyfriend 2.0 upgrade? Aaron shook his head, leaning forward, eyes locked on hers. Not a product, the truth. From his pocket, he pulled out a napkin. Grace laughed. Oh no, don't tell me you're twisting napkins again to calm your nerves. Not this time, he said, handing it to her. On it were scribbles. Gracie plus Aaron equals to the moon. Grace blinked, stunned. She recognized the handwriting from when they were 19, when they used to scrawl nonsense on napkins in this very cafe, dreaming wildly about traveling the world together. You've kept this all this time, she whispered. In my wallet, and he reached into his other pocket, pulling out a worn, heart-shaped keychain, faded with age. This one you already know. Grace stared at the little trinket, her chest trembling with warmth and fear all at once. She quickly masked it with humor. Well, clinging to old junk won't make you young again. You still got those free wrinkles. Aaron laughed but didn't look away. True, I'm older, but old enough to finally understand that I spent too many years chasing things that never warmed my heart. He drew a deep breath, his voice slow, steady, resolute. Grace, I don't deserve you. I know. I chose my career, left you behind when you needed me most, and every city I passed through, every hotel room I slept in, was empty, because you weren't there. He paused, his eyes never leaving hers. I'm not asking you to erase the past. I'm only asking for a chance to write the next part. Not with promises, but with presence. Not I'll come back, but I'm here. Grace felt her heart constrict. On the outside, she forced a laugh, her voice trembling. Sounds like a Broadway monologue. If you start singing, maybe I'll hand you a Tony. Aaron reached out, not touching her, but close enough for his warmth to reach. I'm not acting. I'm terrified, Grace. Terrified it's already too late. But if I don't say this, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Grace tried to keep her smile, but her lips quivered, her eyes burning. She turned her face away, whispering, I don't want to believe anymore. I've taught myself to laugh so I don't cry. I've taught myself to stand alone so I wouldn't need anyone. And now these words, they scare me. Aaron's voice was soft, steady. You can be scared. I won't ask you to let it go. Just let me be here, with the fear too. A tear slipped down Grace's cheek. She let out a laugh choked with sobs, voice trembling. Damn it, my mask just fell off. Aaron wanted to wipe her tears but restrained himself, only murmuring, I see you, not the mask. You. Then he opened his arms, pulling her close into a firm embrace, letting her cry freely against him. His arms said what words could not. I'll always be here. They sat quietly in the candlelight. Grace took a long breath, then propped her chin in her hand, still trying to summon a trace of humor. So, where's the new contract? Terms, duration, penalty clause? Aaron smiled. The only contract, one small thing for you every day. Duration, for life. Penalty, I don't get to disappear. Grace gave a soft laugh, tears still clinging to her lashes. The trembling inside her hadn't vanished, but something was melting, slowly. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe. Just a little, fragile though it was. That month, the publishing house where Grace worked landed a major project, releasing the debut poetry collection of a young writer who had been making waves on social media. If successful, it would be a huge boost for both the company and Grace's career. But right before the print deadline, the author suddenly demanded to withdraw several poems. While the marketing team exploded in panic, the posters had already gone live everywhere. Grace sat frozen before her screen, palms damp with sweat. The department head called, voice sharp. You have to resolve this by Friday. If not, the project collapses, the company loses the sponsorship deal, and you, well, you know. The call ended. Grace pressed her forehead to her hand, then gave a bitter little laugh. Perfect. I'm about to become the famous editor who single-handedly made $1 million project vanish. The office door swung open. Aaron appeared, sleeves rolled up, holding 2 hot coffees. The frenzy of the workplace didn't seem to faze him. You look like you just lost a duel with a dragon. Grace looked up, managing a grin. If it really were a dragon, at least I could roast it for dinner. Aaron set the coffees down, serious now. Tell me, what's going on? Grace gave him the short version, lacing it with jokes to steady herself. Summary: the author's rebelling, marketing's fuming, and the boss is raging, and I'm breaking out in pimples. Aaron laughed but didn't interrupt. When she finished, he leaned forward, decisive. I'm no poet, but I am good at negotiation, and at writing emails that sound polite while saying, absolutely not. Let me help. Grace blinked. You're an international lawyer, not an editor. International lawyers also put out fires in contracts overnight. Trust me, she sighed, shrugged. Fine, but remember, if this project sinks, I'm blaming the unpaid assistant. So the two of them camped out in the small meeting room. Aaron drafted emails to the author, carefully persuasive without bruising artistic pride. He even called the printer directly, negotiating to keep their slot but pushed the deadline back 3 days. Grace, meanwhile, scrambled to edit the manuscript and brainstorm fixes for the marketing posters. Each time she slumped against the table, another hot coffee appeared at her elbow. Who knew the international lawyer was such a skilled coffee runner? She joked tiredly. Survival skills from a law firm that lived on all-nighters, Aaron replied, setting a cookie beside the cup. On the second night, the author sent an email threatening to pull the book entirely. Grace buried her head in her hands. That's it. We're doomed. Aaron pulled his chair close and read carefully. He set a hand flat on the table, voice calm. I'll draft a reply, but it needs to come from you. She has to feel heard by her editor. I'll just stand behind you. Together they worked line by line. Grace's hands trembled, but every time she glanced at him, Aaron's steady gaze anchored her. Friday arrived. The author agreed to keep nearly all the poems, with only minor adjustments. The printer confirmed the revised schedule. Marketing exhaled in relief. The department head clapped Grace on the shoulder. Well done. I don't know how you managed to pull it off, but you just saved the project. When the boss left, Grace let out a long breath. She turned to Aaron, half teasing, half serious. Tell me you didn't just unleash some high-level negotiation tricks on a 22-year-old poet. No tricks, Aaron shrugged. Just honesty and respect. Grace dropped into her chair, covering her face, then burst into laughter as tears spilled out at the same time. I thought I was about to lose everything again. Aaron rested a gentle hand on her shoulder. You didn't lose everything. I'm here. That evening, as they left the office together, the city shimmered with lights. Grace walked beside him, smiling as she teased. Turns out you're not just good at twisting napkins. You can carry deadlines too. Aaron laughed. And turns out you're not just good at cracking jokes. You can lead through a crisis. They stopped at the building's front gate. Grace looked up at him, and inside her rose a truth she couldn't ignore. This time, he hadn't left. He hadn't run, hadn't made excuses, hadn't disappeared. He'd stayed from beginning to end. And for the first time in years, Grace felt her fear step back, making room for something else. Something fragile but real, a growing trust. A year had passed since that rainy night, since Aaron kissed her under the dripping awning and whispered, I'm here. Time hadn't dulled those words. They had become reality. That morning, Grace walked into the conference room where a banner hung high. Congratulations, new senior editor, Grace Miller. Applause filled the room as friends and colleagues hugged her in celebration. She grinned mischievously, raising her hand in mock solemnity. Thank you for your trust. I promise to continue burning the office stove at least 3 times a month, just to maintain my reputation. Laughter rippled through the room. Beyond her own achievements, Aaron had also chosen a new path. He had once again turned down offers to return to international law firms. Instead, he opened a small office right in the city, focusing on contract consulting for local businesses. No more endless flights, no more suitcase, always waiting by the door. Each morning he drove his old car to work, stopping at the same cafe, where Grace would often be waiting, her face lit up by the spark of a new story. That evening, Grace's friends gathered at a cozy bar. The air buzzed with the sound of jazz and laughter. Grace, mocktail in hand, was, as always, the life of the party. I told you already, she declared dramatically, slapping the table. If anyone writes a novel about me, the title has to be The Girl Who Defeated Deadlines with Caffeine and Sarcasm. The table erupted in laughter. One friend teased, and Aaron will just be the supporting character. Carrying coffee, right? Grace narrowed her eyes playfully, raising her glass toward him. Supporting? He's a premium sidekick. Aaron, sitting beside her, only smiled, his gaze soft, steady on her. He knew this time. Grace's smile wasn't a mask to hide fear. It was real joy, the hard-won happiness she had fought for. Then amid the noise, Aaron suddenly stood. He tapped his spoon gently against a glass. The chatter dwindled into silence. Grace looked up, suspicious. What are you doing? Don't forget, I'm the ruthless censorship board. Aaron drew a deep breath, then pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. The room gasped. Grace's eyes widened, her usual witty comebacks vanishing. He dropped to one knee, voice low but unwavering. Grace Miller, you're the only person who's ever taught me that staying means more than any success. Over the past year, I've learned that even the smallest things, refilling the water cooler, fixing the printer, or just bringing you coffee, are enough to give my life meaning. I won't promise because you're allergic to promises. I'll simply ask, let me build a home with you, a place where both fear and trust have space. Will you marry me? The bar fell silent. Grace stood frozen, her heart trembling. Then, almost instinctively, she laughed, shaky but filled with joy. Let me think. Will you wash the dishes? The room burst into laughter and cheers. Aaron laughed too, though his eyes never left hers. Yes, and I'll wipe the counters, take out the trash, anything, as long as it's with you. Grace covered her face, but tears still spilled beneath her smiling eyes. She reached out her hand. Then, yes. Aaron slipped the ring onto her finger. Applause thundered through the bar as they sealed it with a kiss. Later that night, as they left the bar, the city still glowed bright. Aaron held Grace's hand tightly, his warmth wrapping around the lingering tremors in her chest. Grace tilted her head, whispering playfully, From now on, you're officially my full-time Mr. Fix-It. Gladly, Aaron squeezed her hand. And I know, you'll still be afraid sometimes, but we'll be afraid together. Grace laughed. This time it wasn't bitter, nor a disguise. It was the laughter of someone who had found trust again. They walked hand in hand down the golden-lit street. Deep inside, both of them understood. Happiness wasn't about erasing fear, but about embracing it. And together, building a home out of small acts, ordinary days, and a love no longer left unfinished.